In my last video I did a teardown of the latest Layton game, where I explained exactly where Catriel and the Millionaire's Conspiracy failed. This time I'll be looking at ways to improve the Layton series with a hypothetical sequel which shakes up the formula. When I set out my plan for the ideal game I want to create, I have an infinite budget, endless development time, and the talented team I need to help me make the game that I want to make. It's a purely hypothetical exercise that I like to think about in my spare time, because I want a creative outlet for my thoughts on the series that I love. What is ultimately the point of these videos though? Well, they did start out as some ideas I had while talking to people on Reddit, but they've now morphed into something more. I'm tired of game series stagnating and ceasing to be creative, especially after playing Pokemon Sword and Shield, when I realised there were tangible things that could be implemented that could have made a positive impact on the overall experience. I'm not expecting any actual developers to watch these videos and change how they design games or for me to be offered a job.
Please, Nintendo.
But they are fun to make nonetheless. I will only choose a series I am deeply familiar with when I do these videos, so that I have a solid understanding of its history and what aspects need to be improved. For instance, I won't look at a competitive genre like fighting games, since I tend to gravitate more towards casual single-player experiences. That said, I wouldn't dream of looking at a series like Mother or Dark Souls, because they're already so excellent that I don't feel qualified to suggest even hypothetical improvements. Other series like Final Fantasy do a good job in changing up their formula with each title, so I wouldn't consider them stagnant exactly, but I am toying with the idea of taking a look at them anyway. We'll have to see. With all that in mind, Professor Layton is the perfect series to look at because, despite me being a big fan of Curious Village, Diabolical Box and The Unwound Future, it hasn't exactly been on a streak of hits lately. In my review of the latest game, Catriel and the Millionaire's Conspiracy, I explained how I found the puzzles, settings, and characters to be lackluster. And to improve these aspects, I won't be suggesting anything as unconstructive as just make the puzzles better. Instead, I'll try and explore and justify my ideas as fully as I can in objective terms. Curious Village established the formula of whimsical mystery with puzzles interspersed throughout the story. Diabolical Box perfected the creative puzzles, and Unwound Future gave us a tight story with impactful character moments. The rest of these games reused the tried and tested formula of the first three games, but with weaker stories and uninspired puzzles, underutilising the DS and 3DS's capabilities. So, with a Switch game, we will change this, with the theme of this game being integration. The best place to start is with the characters and setting. Not because Catriel and co are poorly written characters in the Millionaire Conspiracy, but because there are more interesting stories that can be explored with Professor Layton himself. The already established characters would fit the story I want to write due to them being more subdued and behaving less like anime tropes given life. The latest game in the timeline was The Unwound Future, which ended with Luke setting sail with his family across the globe, leaving Layton in London to continue solving mysteries with Flora. This game is set 10 years later, where an older Professor Layton gets a letter from a representative of a group called the Triton Private Eyes, informing him that if something were to happen to the boss, he would be the only one trusted to look into the cause. It turns out, Luke has gone missing while trying to solve a mystery in the depths of the Central Americas, and the only trace of him is a bizarre cube he left behind. Layton sets off to find his old friend alongside Flora, and the two's relationship has developed over the years, with Layton trusting her abilities instead of fretting over her all the time. This game shall be titled Professor Layton and the Lost Civilization. Layton and Flora set foot off the boat in the Central Americas and head towards the secluded town of San Rompecabezas. Some ancient scriptures tell of a secret location of vast intellect and knowledge somewhere in the plains of the Central Americas. All roads seem to lead to this small, walled-off town out in the middle of nowhere, which doesn't appear on any official maps. The road to this town serves as the perfect vertical slice, showcasing a bit of everything the game has to offer while also teaching the player the key gameplay mechanics. On the outskirts of town is a camp set up by the Triton PIs, who will fill you in on more details of Luke's disappearance and the customs of the town. To enter into the town, there is a large glowing gate with an intricately carved face upon it which actually speaks in a strange language to Layton and Co. The face also has 4 coloured balls that can be moved along paths, which seem to require a code to enter. First, a classic puzzle regarding the cube relic must be solved for a context clue to the codes. Then the new gameplay is introduced and you scour the areas around the gate for interactable clues to decipher the symbols needed for the code. This involves you clicking on interactable pieces in the background and working out the puzzle in your head. Once these symbols are entered into the gate, then the looming stone door will open, allowing the group to enter, and the first mystery in your notebook will be encouraged to be solved by the player. Your vertical slice of classic puzzles, searching the environment for interactive oddities, speaking to PIs and people for context, and putting them all together to obtain a solution to move forward. Upon doing so, all of the inhabitants in this town seem excitable, but do not speak any recognisable language. San Rompecabezas is a surprisingly vibrant town of delightfully strange characters, as you might expect from a game in the series. These jovial folk are seemingly content in their secluded town filled with marvellous technology that no one in the town quite understands. The environment is luscious and bountiful compared to the outside of the town, but there isn't anyone who can explain exactly why this is. There are even automatons and curious contraptions that help the townsfolk in their daily lives. It's unusual for these citizens to get visitors, but they are welcoming all the same. Layton later discovers that the townfolk are descended from a tribe that respected intelligence more than that of physical might. Their ancient civilization was built upon reasoned debate and technological innovation, which let their society bloom. Yet there are no records after a great woe beset these enlightened peoples, and only a few remained afterwards. When questioning the community as to why none of them ever seem to leave the town, it appears that when they leave the gates, their memory is stripped from them and they wander through the plains, completely forgetting about their past lives in San Rompecabezas. The history and setting give enough context for why Layton would be solving puzzles constantly. In contrast to the millionaire's conspiracies setting of London, the town's culture is entirely based around testing one's intellect combined with the multiple puzzles baked into the very structures inside the town. Upon finding some strange advanced power sources and technology, Layton contacts the only person he trusts to help his investigation with understanding the mechanical wonders inside, Don Paolo. He and Layton would have reconciled quite a lot since the events of the Unwound Future. It's still an uneasy friendship and has a clashing of ideals, but the mechanical menace's expertise with technology and disguises are crucial to this investigation. This would be a fun dynamic for an investigative group which serves the story without devolving into a meaningless cameo. This is because Don Paolo would be the only established ally Layton knows who could possibly understand the ancient machines. Plus, the game dialogue would gain its much needed levity from Paul's inclusion in the party. There should be more of a focus on Flora in this game, as she was quite underutilised in the previous entries, often just demoted to a damsel in distress for Layton to save. She was so eager to explore new vistas and environments since the first game due to spending her whole life growing up in a tower, so her eagerness and optimism should be at the forefront. Her childlike innocence will let her easily ingratiate herself with the locals, especially the children of the town, when it comes to finding out more information about her surroundings. But her main character arc will come from Flora taking the initiative as the plot progresses, in solving puzzles herself, stepping out of Layton's shadow, so to speak. Professor Layton would understandably be focused on finding Luke for the majority of the story, while learning about his old friend's life abroad during the decade of distance between the two. The biggest change with the Professor will be in gameplay, where he will solve the majority of the puzzles in the first half of the game, but Flora and Don Paolo will take the spotlight in the second half as he thematically lets them take more charge. With the decade off screen between games, there is a lot of implied character growth which will be filled in with dialogue between Professor Layton, Flora and Don Paolo. But this will serve more as humorous anecdotes rather than big character changes, as they all will still keep their personalities and relationships intact between the games. The town of San Rompecabezas would be a varied setting, with the unusual scientific advances angle combined with the Mesoamerican style of ancient ruins and structures. Added to the lush greenery amidst the surrounding barren plains, strange structures and bizarre isolation of the townsfolk serve as great hooks to invest the player in the game's mystery. Other odd occurrences include disappearances of children in the town every year on the same day, a graveyard of scrapped abnormal automobiles, and the advanced machinery that permeates the town without the citizens understanding why or how it works. To top it off, after finding some antiquated tomes about the lost civilization's past, Flora discovers that the town has ties to Saint Mystere of all places, with the secrets to automatons being traded with foreign travellers for puzzles and intellectual findings. There doesn't need to be a world-ending plot, but instead something more personal. The stakes would boil down to a potential lost opportunity in the final chapters. Suffice to say that Layton and Flora will find Luke older, wiser, yet butting heads with Layton in terms of an ethical choice at the end of the game, culminating in a theme of destruction of dangerous knowledge against potential scientific advancement. Yet it ends up being Flora's genuine innocence combined with an informed wisdom that finds a compromise between the two sides, ending with a big hug from Luke, Flora and Layton, finally reunited after a decade. The major change I've made is to move away from an overuse of one-off puzzles, as I'll call them, and focus more on general overworld puzzles. I define one-off puzzles as the classic Layton cutaways that move from the overworld and give you text and an image requiring you to move pieces, enter letters or numbers, or hit switches to fulfill the requirements. The focus on the overworld puzzles would be in a slight Metroidvania style, with upgrades to the base mechanics, unveiling more information about the setting along with adding more solutions to problems. You will receive 3 major items throughout your investigation that change the way you look at the existing town locations. The first item you receive would be quite early in the game, being the Oído. As you progress, you would receive the Ojo and the Mano. 90% of the overworld riddles could be solved off the bat, but on a first playthrough you wouldn't have any clues towards their solution without the items. These items would each have 3 to 4 different uses that would help you in your search, and would also open up optional puzzles or more smaller side quests or cases. The items themselves should have one upgrade that isn't particularly necessary for the critical path, but will open up new features and optional content. For example, the Oído, or the ear, will be the most critical and first upgrade, as it will translate the native language into understandable English. Thus, you can interact with the residents. Being able to interact with these people will grant you access to their side quests, but also the Oído will allow understanding of riddles and logic puzzles that the residents are saying for both immediate one-off puzzles and overworld puzzle hints. Whereas the Oído's upgrade will allow you to hear audio frequencies in an area you couldn't hear before, such as puzzles involving music, locating animals, tuning certain bells to open a code, etc. The Mano, or the hand, will allow you to manipulate certain locks in 3D visual puzzle boxes using the Joy-Con's motion controls, along with the HD rumble feature. The upgrade for this will be magnetism, which would just allow you to play with more types of 3D spatial awareness puzzles. Pressing A during a 3D puzzle will move metallic objects towards the hand. It will power certain batteries and magnetic components in a circuit, or even disrupt laser beams, for example. The Ojo, or the eye, would allow you to scan certain areas for hidden symbols, text, or other juicy secrets in the overworld. Highlighting fingerprints or tracks of animals in the dirt would be identified on screen whilst using the Oho's ability. Also, certain symbols and sentences would now be decipherable, as while the Oido can translate language audio, you still cannot read the language. The upgrade will now let you identify metallic objects, or things that have a power source running through them, or fake walls and secret areas that require solving hidden locks or puzzles to enter them, or even showing strong fragrances you can follow in a puff of smoke, similar to Wolf Link from Twilight Princess. Another option for the upgrade could be to give more information on each of the residents you meet, which could add more nuance to the characters and the setting as a whole. Using these items together would give you far more information to be able to access new areas and overcome more obstacles. Perhaps a certain lock would require you to move a ball along a trail maze to reach a hole and open the door, whereas activating the magnet would pull the ball up earlier for a secret hole and a hidden puzzle or chest that gives you a neat hat. There are strange faces carved into a wall that when looked at with the Oho will show hidden likeness to residents in the town that imply an order in which you should interact with them, leading to using the upgraded Oho to find a hidden door under the faces once they are spoken to. There are birds that sing songs in the outskirts of town, dogs that howl certain notes, a girl who sings a few notes of a song, as well as an anthill that produces a small melody. You can then listen to the residents who say something like, "There is a song in this village called the food chain." You can put these notes together in the order of ants, birds, dogs, humans, in a reference roughly to where they would be in the food chain, and play these notes on a piano for a secret. Maybe strange symbols sprayed on certain areas, where if you write each symbol down after being told north, west, east, south, you can formulate some sort of solution to a lock based on how these symbols would overlay into a shape. You can get an old fountain to squirt water in certain ways to fix it in a plumbing puzzle with the Mano, where you need to get each of the pieces of the pipework from later areas to come back and fix it. Honestly, it is down to the creativity of how the Switch can be utilised, which wasn't the case for the DS and the 3DS games. You could have a puzzle where you could attach and detach Joy-Cons in a certain pattern, undocking and docking the Switch for handheld touchscreen puzzles, or another puzzle that specifically involves you docking the console to download data, for example, using the Joy-Con as a Wii Remote pointer or the motion controls in many ways to solve manipulation puzzles, using the camera button on the left Joy-Con for a secret when someone asks you to take a picture. Though, in fairness, these would alienate the Switch Lite, which I couldn't see Nintendo implementing since they don't want to cannibalize the sales, but this is my fantasy, damn it, I'm doing it. I don't want to seem like a nostalgia-fueled loser,
even though I am,
but I would certainly move away from the most recent game structure. However, I would take some inspiration for some of the aspects from Catriel and the Millionaire's Conspiracy in the shorter, simpler cases, but I'll adjust to them. My idea is for the game to return to one unfolding narrative set in a singular location. One big mystery, but some optional, smaller mysteries around the location that add flavour and rewards. These optional cases are extremely short and require the use of your detective skills and tools to figure out much more difficult logical puzzles on the overworld. But in general, I want a big fleshed out mystery with intriguing characters and locales, and your standard Layton stings along the way. The biggest thing I would take from this is there will be a certain piece of inspiration taken from point-and-click adventure games and survival horror games like Resident Evil or Silent Hill regarding the puzzles. The main gameplay will not revolve around puzzles which result in moving to a new area and getting more dialogue or a cutscene, but instead, more detective analysis for the player. Cutting down the one-off puzzles from 150 to 50, refining them in story context and focusing on the interactivity of the town, integrating everything together. This is why the notepad should be key here to actually take notes and draw diagrams. Games like Outer Wilds and Return of the Obra Dinn respect the player's intelligence and lead to some incredible puzzles and satisfying aha moments. And I think this could be the change that Layton Formula so desperately needs. Now you may ask, why? What incentive do you have to solve these side puzzles or things that don't appear on the critical path? Before we get into that, I'm doing away with picker-ats altogether and I'm repurposing hint coins. I'll make the hints completely free to use and even in easy mode, where you can click on something in the menu and it will give you hints about the overworld puzzles or where to go next. Also, usually a player has a plethora of hint coins at the end of any Layton game. It's rare for people to actually run out of them. So I'm going to change how they're spent. There will be a shop that uses hint coins as currency if you pay a certain amount for the hidden features. The Oido, the Oho, and the Mano, this is where you'll get their upgraded features from. You'll also get cosmetic outfits for Don Paolo, Flora, and Layton here, and other cool little tidbits. Maybe even parts of the side quests or the little mini games you get in your shop. You can buy trinkets and parts here with hint coins. This is because tapping on the backgrounds wouldn't be a big part of this gameplay, as I'm trying to make every background and area interactable with puzzles. So how each area went in previous games would be that you would enter an area, tap every single part of the background until you got the 3 hint coins or perhaps a hidden puzzle, and then you would speak to the people and carry on the story. Whereas I want everything chock full of secrets and puzzles that can be interacted with, collectible items like keys or winches or cranks which you can later use on specific puzzles or remember bits of information and go back to areas. So hint coins will be more of a reward for solving puzzles and cases instead of just lying around the overworld. These side missions or optional missions do not affect the main story at all, but will add more flavour and hints towards its true nature. For example, we could speak to a resident who has a farm, but only certain areas of the plot of land are growing crops. If you inspected the soil, you could realise there is circuitry and ancient machinery underneath the faulty ground, which you can then trace back to a power source and fix the circuit or something. This would then help out the resident by using the upgraded Oho. Then you realise that the residents don't understand how much of the town's crops rely on this super irrigation system and generally knowledge of all of the machinery hidden around the town. Perhaps knowledge of such things has been lost or even hidden from ordinary residents. The last thing being changed in this game is also the most difficult to speak about. I cannot say how I would change the puzzles, the one-off classic Layton puzzles, or how I'd make them more engaging, but I can speak to how the other factors would affect them. Cutting the puzzles down from 150 to 50 means that each one will be given more time and effort dedicated to it, with more difficult variants perhaps giving as a reward for completing side quests or after finishing the game. Mainly, these puzzles would be completely contextual within the story. So I don't want residents talking about aliens and RPG monsters giving you these puzzles, but something actually related to the person or area you're in. This will give a sense of cohesion to the world. The overworld puzzles in the town make sense and fit in with the setting and the general theme of the Layton series, an integration of everything. For example, a resident speaks about how the grass grows in strange patterns around the areas of the town. You get the puzzle pop-up. It should be to do with the grass and the pathways and ancient tech that affects them. Solving the puzzle will lead to a discovery for Layton and the gang and how they would proceed to investigate, perhaps finding an old power generator or a route to the sewer. The puzzle itself and the answer should make sense and push the story forward, which would benefit the game more than, oh, I won't tell you what I saw until you solve this balloon puzzle. One or two of those prove your intelligence puzzles is fine in certain parts of the story, as the townspeople respect intellectual might and would then lead the residents to be more willing to cooperate. But these puzzles should all serve a purpose and be thematically relevant and integrated into the story. Finally, regarding actually solving some of the mysteries. In previous games, the main mystery aspects you need to solve would be filled in the notepad when part of the story was triggered. I would like these to actually require the player's input to solve. Catriel in the Millionaire's Conspiracy requires you to solve Baby's first jigsaw for Catriel to then proceed with the solution. A better way to engage the player would be to have an unfinished paragraph of the explanation to the mystery with 10 options in each missing sentence. Only available to solve once you have actually triggered the information in the game's code, i.e. the player is reasonably seen enough in the game to make a deduction. Thus, the player is required to engage with the narrative and will become more invested by proxy. You are solving a jigsaw still technically, but it is more that you're understanding what each piece is and how each piece fits together in the story. The player will feel like they have solved the mystery themselves, which is far better than watching Layton do the legwork. Everything in the overworld, where you speak to the residents, make notes, figure out how to unlock doors, open safes and find hidden areas, all of these aren't kept from the player until Layton makes a comment. but most of it comes down to the player deciphering some information and thus solving the puzzle on their own. Everything should put the onus on the player to make the connections and participate in the role of being a detective. This game is more of an evolution of the formula, taking inspiration from other successful puzzle games and respecting the player's intelligence. Finally, making you, the player, feel more like the clever clogs instead of Layton or Catriel, who just reveals the story to the player and has their thought processes off screen which you can't see. Everything is figured out by you. I cannot help but think this would be the shot in the arm the series deserves, and boy, I would love to see it.